Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
The Canadian government initiated a 10-day period of mourning following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. The chief from the James Smith Cree Nation speaks out following the deadly stabbing rampage which shook his community in Saskatchewan. And we hear about an Alberta company trying to become an industry leader in the production of electric motorcycles. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Governor General Mary Simon, the British monarch's representative in Canada, reacted to the death of the Queen she represented. Simon says Queen Elizabeth II cared deeply about people and saw Canada as her second home.
In countless languages around the world, people are sharing solemn words of remembrance. Today, in Inuktitut, I add to these tributes. On behalf of all Canadians, my husband Whit and I offer our condolences to the royal family on the loss, not just of a queen, but of a mother, grandmother, and a great-grandmother. Her Majesty cared about people, about our well-being. This was clear every time we spoke. She cared about Canada and all the unique stories that make up our beautiful country.
Following the Queen's death on Thursday, the Canadian government initiated a 10-day period of mourning to mark the monarch's incredible 70-year reign. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fought to maintain his composure as he spoke more about the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. He said she was one of his favorite people in the entire world.
She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more. In a complicated world, her steady grace and resolve brought comfort and strength to us all. Canada is in mourning. She was one of my favorite people in the world, and I will miss her so.
The death of the Queen sent shockwaves throughout Canada. A few expressed their condolences to the royal family and discussed how much the monarch really meant to them.
I guess especially in her country, it'll mean a lot of changes. I don't know what the people's reaction will be. Probably a sense of loss, and I'm sure they'll be watching closely to see what kind of changes take place. Hope it goes smoothly for everyone.
How are you feeling today hearing the news of the Queen?
When I heard, I was very saddened. It's very sad she's died. It's a great loss for the UK. It's a great loss, you know. I remember when she was the coronation as a young man. I went to the celebration in the village at the tennis court, and they had tea and like a tea garden and everything. Yeah, it's a great loss.
Meanwhile, a large crowd cheered as King Charles III arrived at Buckingham Palace for the first time as Britain's monarch. He flew from Scotland to London and was driven to the royal residence. King Charles greeted well-wishers and looked at a large selection of floral tributes left to honor his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Many shouted, "God save the King." Now, in the coming days, the Queen's body will be moved from Scotland to London, where she will lie in a state of Parliament before a state funeral. There were hugs, tears, and calls for change as Indigenous leaders gathered on the James Smith Cree Nation. It is a Saskatchewan community in mourning following a deadly stabbing rampage which left a total of 12 people dead and 19 others injured.
Where to begin or where to start? I've been thinking for the past few days. No words can emphasize the feelings that we're going through. There are a lot of us, the families, the membership that are seeking help. There's a lot of emotions right now. No words can express anything on the things that happened. There are a lot of things that occurred in the past little while, stories that are out there.
The Lethbridge College Kodiaks unveiled a new Indigenous logo earlier today. The college is now the first in the Canadian Collegiate Athletic Association to incorporate Indigenous culture into its gymnasium. Lowell Yellowhorn, the Indigenous Services Manager for the college, says there are 2 Indigenous words that are now decorating the gym floor, and he explained the significance of what each word means.
And that refers to stone pipe in the Blackfoot language, and the essence behind that name, it was transferred to Lethbridge College in a traditional Blackfoot format. It refers to kicking off the education process. Ekwania refers to body language and body movement in the Blackfoot mindset, and it's about being able to read and understand the way a person carries themselves. And for our athletics and our Kodiaks here at Lethbridge College, that's an important part of the competitive process in sports, is that you have to be able to understand your opponent and be able to read their body language.
The new design will also be worked into future uniforms for the student athletes at Lethbridge College. First responders in Lethbridge joined forces for a memorial parade earlier today to mark the 21st anniversary of 9/11. The parade took place in downtown Lethbridge. Video journalist Micah Quinn has the story about the importance of never forgetting those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty.
The Honor Guard and Pipe Band led out a procession of first responders starting at the Lethbridge Fire Station on 4th Avenue in our city's downtown. This included members of the Lethbridge Police Service, peace officers, and staff from Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services. Marchers reiterated during the day that remembering those who have laid down their lives in the line of duty is something they will never forget.
But it's also a piece we would be foolish to not learn from the past as well. And we learn in things like mental health and continuing to support. We learn about things like job-related cancers and mitigating that for as much as we possibly can. Learning in the way that we properly staff apparatus and make sure that first responders have the very best equipment to do their job in an effective and safe manner.
The group walked in solidarity all the way to the Southminster United Church for a memorial service to top off the event.
It's a tremendous honor. I think that's largely what we do here. The fire service is steeped in tradition, and we hold these things pretty important to us, where we recognize the sacrifices that were made by many of our members. Whether we knew them or not, we still consider them sisters and brothers.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thanks to a $6,000 donation from Heaven Hill Distilleries and a partnership with Black Velvet Distilling Company, 40 trees were planted in Lethbridge's Palliser Park today. It was all part of a sustainability project. By the year 2030, Heaven Hill hopes to plant about 5,000 trees in local communities. The group's Director of Environment and Sustainability, Rachel Nally, says they have planted about 100 trees so far.
We have planted trees in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where our company is based. And now we're starting to branch out into the other communities where our folks live and work. And so here we are in Lethbridge. Trees help do things like absorb carbon dioxide that helps with climate change, that absorbs air pollution from the road behind us, and helps filter stormwater pollutants.
The park's planning manager for the city of Lethbridge says this afternoon's tree planting was a good opportunity to expand the city's urban forests.
It's just a great way to build community, build corporate relationships, and not just rely on just the city for planting trees, but getting corporate involvement and really just expanding the environmental benefits of our urban forest.
About 44 volunteers took part in the planting in Palliser Park in Lethbridge. Well, it is harvest time for a lot of our producers. David Bishop is a grain farmer in Barons, Alberta. He's also the past chair of Alberta Barley and joins us now from Barons. David, how's the yield looking so far this year? Will you have a bumper crop?
We're going to be probably a little bit below average on the dry land. Our irrigation, of course, is going to be as good as always is because we can manage the water on irrigation. But I think we're 3/4 done harvest. So basically, mostly we have a little bit of irrigation left to do and our dry land canola.
So what are your thoughts on the Trudeau Liberals asking farmers to voluntarily reduce fertilizer and specifically nitrogen emissions by 30%? How will that really impact your business?
The only way probably that we could reduce our emissions is either with new technology that hasn't been invented yet or a basic reduction in fertilizer use. And if we have a reduction in fertilizer use, we have a reduction in our yield, reduction in our income and our expenses. We will, it's just the way expenses are today, they've gone up quite a bit. We can't afford to lose our yield because it's a low margin business being a farmer most years. So we got to keep our expenses in line and make sure that our inputs give us the best chance to produce our best crop.
Thanks so much, David. That was David Bishop, a Barron's Alberta farmer and past chair with Alberta Barley. Well, the recent rain we've received has been a welcome sight for many here in southwestern Alberta, including our farmers. Angela Stewart is in downtown Lethbridge with an early peek at the forecast. Angela, it appears as though the rain clouds are moving on and we should have a fairly nice weekend.
That's right, Hal. Looking ahead, the weekend is shaping up beautifully. Double-digit temperatures with lots of sunshine expected. Tonight, though, a little bit chillier. Clear conditions and a low of +2. There's also a risk of frost in the forecast. As for the rest of the week, I'll have all those details coming up later in the show.
Thanks so much, Angela. The Conservative Party of Canada announced that it is still moving ahead with a planned leadership event tomorrow and will name the party's new leader, even though the country is still in a period of national mourning following the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Brian Lilly is a Toronto Sun columnist and a political reporter, and he's been following the CPC leadership quite closely. Mr. Lilly says Pierre Poilievre is the frontrunner, but stranger things have happened when it comes to leadership contests.
And it's something that I got from one of the previous campaigns that didn't win under this system. They said, if he doesn't get over 45% on the first ballot, then it becomes increasingly difficult for the front runner to win. And the front runner, of course, is Pierre Poilievre. Now, look, the people I'm talking to, including those who have worked on other camps, the expectation is Poilievre is going to win on the first ballot. If he doesn't, and he's below that 45% threshold, then things get really interesting because, okay, well, where do Scott Aitchison's votes go? Where do Roman Baber's votes go? Where do Leslyn Lewis's votes go? There was a lot of talk that she, in fact, and she did very well in the last leadership, I don't think she'll do as well this one, that she was just encouraging people to only mark first choice, nothing else. So a lot of unknowns. It's a very complex system, but I still think that we're going to have the outcome we expect, and I think we'll have it fairly quickly.
Ian Brodie, chair of the party's Leadership Election Organizing Committee, said the results will be revealed at Ottawa's Shaw Centre sometime after 6 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Brodie says a revised program will be more somber to reflect the passing of the Queen. The United Conservative Party here in Alberta will be choosing its new leader on October the 6th. Former Wildrose leader Daniel Smith is one of the frontrunners. But some UCP members may not be too forgiving when it comes to when she crossed the floor from the Wildrose to the PCs years ago. BCN's Jeanette Roche had a chance to chat with Smith about that day. She says it was a huge mistake.
There's no question it was a mistake in 2015, and I ended up losing my nomination, and Jim Prentice ended up losing the election. I think people now can begin to see that part of what we were trying to do is to bring unity to the Conservative movement. I mean, we did it the wrong way, and the public wasn't ready for it at that time. But now I'm hearing is fear that the unity that we brought, that Jason Kenney and Brian Jean brought by bringing the party together is going to bust apart. I don't want to see that happen. I know Brian Jean doesn't want to see that happen. It's why both of us have jumped into this race, is that we want to keep this movement together. Both of us gave up an awful lot for unity, and I believe that the UCP project is one that's worth saving.
You can catch the full interview with Daniel Smith coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta's NDP says the UCP is in chaos and has no plan to help address the worst inflation in 40 years. NDP Deputy House Leader Irfan Sabir says the province has no plan to build a modern and diverse economy to help get more Albertans working again. He says the government has a lot of issues that need addressing.
Albertans right now are facing cost of living crisis, worst cost of living crisis in 40 years. Our hospital system is in chaos. We are seeing more and more red alerts where ambulances are not available when Albertans need them. And there are so many issues facing our communities. And what we saw from this UCP, that they're divided, they're busy in fighting, and they're yet debating another fraudulent plan to stand up to Ottawa instead of focusing on issues that matter to Albertans, instead of focusing on providing relief to Albertans who are struggling to make ends meet because of the affordability crisis.
A local realtor believes that first-time home buyers won't be getting their desired budget they're hoping for when they try to lock in a mortgage. This is because of the recent interest rate hikes from the Bank of Canada. Brian Perversive with Royal LePage says the increase in interest rates has now decreased a person's buying power, but he doesn't think it will affect the market as a whole here in southern Alberta.
Unfortunate because, a lot of people have that dream house in mind, and then now that's dream house is out of reach for them, or even to get started that way, it's out of reach. You compare there's no comparison whatsoever to our market compared to the larger markets in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, and so forth. That's where the interest rate is probably going to have the most effect, because in our market, our average sale price of homes is about $330,000. You go to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, you're looking at $2-3 million homes and so forth. So that interest rate is going to drastically affect those regions a lot more than it is ours.
Perversive says that he does believe that more people will be reluctant to buy a home now because of the higher interest rates. It appears as though the rain clouds in Lethbridge may be moving on, and it's looking like a nice dry weekend. Full weather details are on deck. We had more rain in many parts of southwestern Alberta again today. Angela Stewart is out in the community with a full look at the forecast. Angela, it may be a nice weekend for a barbecue party with a dry weekend shaping up.
Yes, pull out that barbecue, Hal. It should be a great weekend for it. Tonight, however, you might need a hoodie or even move closer to that barbecue just to stay warm. It will be a little cool, although under a clear sky with a low of near 2 degrees. Saturday, 26 degrees and sunny conditions. Looking to Sunday, expect that sunshine to stick around with a high of 29 degrees. To kick off the work week, a mix of sun and cloud and 22 degrees on Monday. Beautiful conditions on Tuesday, sunny skies and 23. 21 for the high on Wednesday and a mix of sun and cloud. Thursday, a mix of sun and cloud and 23 degrees. Checking the almanac now, the average high for this time of year, 21 degrees. The average low, 6. The record high was 32 degrees set back in 1981, and the record low was just -1. The sun rose at 6:58 and set at 7:59, giving us just over about 13 hours of daylight. Looking to temperatures across the country now for Saturday, Victoria is sitting at 26 degrees. Lots of sunshine there, but do expect some smoky conditions near the Juan de Fuca Strait. Vancouver, same picture. Some local smoke, 24 degrees for the high there, but do also expect warmer temperatures, about 30 degrees in the inland. Looking to Calgary and Edmonton now, lots of sunshine for Saturday for both of those cities, 24 and 25 degrees. A little windier in Regina tomorrow, but still lots and lots of sunshine, 23 the high, 22 the high in Saskatoon. The same can also be said for Winnipeg for Saturday. Some westerly winds in the early afternoon, 20 degrees for the high and mainly sunny. Now Toronto, the high 28 with the humidex at 33, so quite warm there. For Saturday, Ottawa, sunny skies, 20 kilometers southwesterly winds in the afternoon. The high 29 degrees in our nation's capital. Moving to Montreal, mainly sunny with some fog patches in the morning and a high of 30 degrees. Halifax, fog patches as well in the morning and a high of 22 and sunny. Fredericton, those sunny skies, 27 degrees expected. Charlottetown, a high of 21 and sunny conditions. And St. John's, wetter conditions for Saturday, only just 15 degrees and a chance of rain. And Hal, that's a look at the forecast from downtown Lethbridge.
Canada's unemployment rate was 5.4% in August. That was the first uptick in 7 months as the economy lost 40,000 jobs. Wages were also up 5.4% compared to last year. Economists say that will make the Bank of Canada nervous as it tries to quell inflation. The central bank raised its key interest rate by 0.75 of a percentage point to 3.25% this week. A new report by the Fraser Institute says most of the new jobs created during the pandemic were in the public and not the private sector. The study found that the public sector accounted for close to 87% of all new net jobs created since the start of the pandemic. The private sector, meanwhile, remained almost stagnant at just 0.4%. Ben Eisen, senior fellow at the Fraser Institute and co-author of the report, says job creation was mostly driven by government hiring. Deloitte Canada says that may be due to an increase in healthcare jobs and passport renewals, which led to growth in public sector employment. Adjusted for population growth, adults age 15 and older working in the private sector decreased by more than a percentage point from 49.3 to 48.2%. There's an Alberta company which wants to become an industry leader in the manufacturing of electric bikes, including dirt bikes. Nathan Armstrong with Armstrong Custom Fabrication says there's a huge demand for electric motorbikes. He says the higher the demand, the more his business will expand and hire more workers.
The main thing is we're making them in Western Canada. We're trying to create employment opportunities building these vehicles. That's kind of our main goal. We'd like to see Western Canada have a slice of this electric vehicle market and have some jobs out here building stuff that we think is represents Canada well, represents Western Canada well, does well in the Canadian environment, right, which is a big thing for vehicles up here. And just kind of do a good job representing Canada in the global stage of electric vehicles.
Nathan Armstrong will also discuss the range of these bikes, if they can be driven in the wintertime, and their pricing. That's all coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 360 points on the day to finish at 19,773. The Dow was up 377 points to 32,151. The S&P 500 was up 61 points on the day to 4,067. And the Nasdaq was up 250 to 12,112. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 255 to 86.09 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 13 cents to 8.05 US. Gold was up 837 to 1716.83 US an ounce, and silver was up 32 cents to 1886 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.97 per bushel, barley's at $8.40, canola's at $17.45, and corn is at $11.63 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.30 to $145.68, feeder cattle were up $1.18 to $185.58, and lean hogs were up $1.05 to $93.18, all October contracts. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.74 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Canadian government initiated a 10-day period of mourning following Queen Elizabeth's death on Thursday to mark the monarch's incredible 70-year reign. King Charles III now takes over as the new monarch. There's an Alberta company which is trying to become an industry leader in the manufacturing of electric dirt bikes. Nathan Armstrong is leading the charge, and we'll have more details for us shortly. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Electric modes of transportation are gaining in popularity. While some Canadian airlines are investigating electric aircraft, there's a Southern Alberta company that is now making electric dirt bikes. Nathan Armstrong of Armstrong Custom Fabrication joins us now from Rocky View County here in Alberta to talk about how this idea came about. Nathan, welcome to Bridge City News.
Going to be here, thank you.
Now, first of all, how long have you been building electric motorbikes?
I've been building vehicles since 1996, mostly concept vehicles, prototype vehicles, some production vehicles. I've been dreaming about doing a dirt bike since about 1998. Just waiting for the technology to catch up with the idea, and we're finally here. So,
you know, my first bike was an old '69 Yamaha street bike, two-stroke. It used to smoke like there was no tomorrow, but I had so much fun with that thing riding from Calgary to McKay's Ice Cream out in Cochrane. So great memories until winter hit, of course, in Southern Alberta. Then I ended up taking the bus when I was a kid. Now, you make electric dirt bikes. Any chance of maybe building electric street bikes? Perhaps a cool chopper?
There's lots of projects in the works. You can't actually register our dirt bikes as a street bike. So if you buy one, you can, as a consumer, register it as a street bike. It's just as a manufacturer, we don't have that step completed yet. But yeah, there's a kid's bike in the works. There's an electric stunt bike we've been commissioned to build, and some other fun stuff that we're doing. So,
now, what kind of work were you doing before you went down the path of building electric motorcycles?
We were building vehicles for other companies. That's our main business. So we design, engineer, fabricate prototype vehicles for other companies who are starting up and getting products into the market. So we've done 3 electric motorcycles for companies in the US, and we just thought it was time to throw a hat in the ring and try our own thing here and see if we can make a go of a product coming out of Canada.
So Nathan, what have been some of the biggest challenges you faced lately?
Supply chain has been a little challenging, but yeah, no, actually, it's been fairly smooth sailing. It's been fairly good. We just have the first bikes out now for review. They're down in the States with some influencers and some big groups down there doing some testing. And we're getting some good positive feedback on those tests, and we're going to start. Sales are happening now, so we're in production and we're selling bikes. So.
George Carlin, when he was alive, the comedian, used to say that motorbikes sound a lot like their names, Yamaha or Harley, right? So a lot of people actually like the sound that bikes make, but with electric bikes, they're fairly quiet.
They're very quiet. Yeah, we do have an option to put. We have the side panels energized with speakers, so we can make noises and we can make different haptic feedback for the rider. But we can make engine noises if you really want to make engine noises. So. But it's nice to ride quietly through the forest. It's a nice peaceful experience, being quiet. So,
when I talk to Harley riders as well, and I talk to them about it, I said, well, why is it so loud all the time? He says, well, when it comes from the factory, it's actually quite quiet. We have to put on the aftermarket accessories to make it really sound like a Harley. But how we do it for our safety, because there's so many crazy drivers on the roads today. We want people to know where we are at all times so they're aware. So with an electric bike, it's fairly quiet. Isn't that more dangerous?
I wouldn't say it's more dangerous. I mean, these aren't street bikes at this point. These are dirt bikes, and they do make a bit of noise. Like it kind of sounds like an electric race car, kind of noise, like a turbine kind of a noise at high speeds. So they do make a little bit of noise, but most people enjoy the quiet. Most people enjoy the ability to ride in neighborhoods, like backyard tracks, this kind of thing. It kind of opens up a new area of possibilities for people to ride in places that you couldn't ride because of noise issues before. And then from a maintenance standpoint, there's no maintenance on the bike ever. So like if you buy this for your kid, you don't have to be changing oil on the weekends. There's no smell. There's some upsides to it, but the main thing is we're making them in Western Canada. We're trying to create employment opportunities building these vehicles. That's kind of our main goal. We'd like to see Western Canada have a slice of this electric vehicle market and have some jobs out here building stuff that we think represents Canada well, represents Western Canada well, does well in the Canadian environment, right, which is a big thing for vehicles up here. And just kind of do a good job of representing Canada in the global stage of electric vehicles. That's kind of our main goal. So
Nathan, let's talk about some of the feedback you've received from your customers across North America.
We're beating records. It's wonderful. The last test we had, we beat the KTM electric bike by like 20 miles an hour on the top speed. We equaled their acceleration. We're 80 pounds lighter. So we have quite an interesting package. And what we're excited about is there's other companies coming up in this same space, and there's real racing happening. So we want to get in on the racing action and see if we can get some wins in the stadium races too.
Now, there's some serious competition when it comes to making electric vehicles, whether it's bikes, cars, airplanes. There's a lot of competition these days. How, or maybe to whom, are you marketing a lot of these bikes?
Really the performance enthusiast and someone who's looking for something high quality, right? Like we're trying to make the best high quality vehicles we can make. We're trying to make them last for generations. That's really the goal, right? So like we have a triple lifetime warranty. So like your grandkids can come and get the frame repaired still. We're really trying to make it like the best you can make an electric bike, right? It's super high performance. We're making our own batteries. It's just a quality product, right? So that's really, we're going for people who just want the best, really. And,
I talked about that old Yamaha street bike that I had, that 69 two-stroke. It was a 250cc motor. How do you classify the output or size of an electric bike?
It's very difficult. We have more power than a 450cc up to 20 kilometers an hour. And then we're kind of about like a 250cc four-stroke kind of speed. Off the line is incredibly fast. And then top speed is about 120. So they get up and go pretty good. 0 to 60 in like about 9 seconds kind of thing. So, they're good. They're fast. They're much faster than we expected, put it that way. When we started building these things, it was kind of an experiment to see how we would do. And when we built our own battery, we really turned up the power, and the bike side just kept going faster and kept going faster. We were all fairly surprised by the performance we were getting from it. And now we've put it out for review, and other people are surprised as well. So it's just turned out to be a good overall package for this particular bike. So.
You know, Nathan, I've interviewed a few Tesla owners over the years, and they say, well, the Teslas are great for about the first 7 or 8 years, but by years 9 and 10, they have to replace all of the batteries. And a lot of times it's not even worth doing that because it's $20,000. It's so expensive replacing the batteries. They just turf the car. So what about the batteries when it comes to replacing them on the electric bikes?
Well, they're about $2,500 our cost to build them. That's what we're selling them for. But it's kind of an interesting thing because when you buy the bike, the battery comes out of the bike. And so when you buy the bike, you're actually buying a battery that you can use independently of the bike. So if you want to like back up your office at your home, or you want to run your laptop at the campsite or something like that, you have this battery you can use. And you can swap them out. So if you're racing, you can have a battery charging while you're racing and then swap them out kind of thing. So it's a different, we like these small vehicles because of that aspect. The battery is light, it's not expensive. We're still getting 300 kilometers range out of that battery, but because it's a small light vehicle, we don't use a lot of energy. So yeah, we're thinking that this is kind of a nice form factor for batteries, and we'd like to see this become like a ubiquitous kind of a battery that can be used for the multiple vehicles, can be used in people's homes, backing up businesses. We do all sorts of things with this battery. So, but it's definitely small enough for one person to carry 2 of them. That's kind of the goal. Yeah.
So what other maintenance outside of the battery itself would these e-bikes really have?
Nothing, chain and tires. That's it. That's like forever. Like we don't even have a rear brake, so we're using the regenerative braking for the bike. So we're not even wearing out the brake pads. So it should run for 10,000 years, like without any maintenance. Like that's kind of the nice thing about them, right? They should just go forever. Future-proof. Anything that happens in the future is going to be a software upgrade, which we can do over the air kind of thing. So from a software perspective, they're future-proof. So yeah, we really think this is a vehicle for the future. And it's really fun in the winter too. You mentioned like not riding the bike in the winter. With a couple of feet of snow, it's a blast. It's really, really fun. So we've been using them like snowmobiles out here, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Is there that potential maybe down the road, put on some good winter tires and then ride these e-bikes in the wintertime, as long as it's maybe around -5 to -10?
They go better in the cold. They like the cold. So the colder it is, the faster they go. So.
Now, you mentioned about the range with some of these bikes, and how many kilometers can someone possibly get?
We get about 2 hours riding time if you're really pushing it. If you go in gentle, 3 or 4 hours riding time.
Now, as you were designing and building these bikes, Nathan, and developing the manufacturing process, let's talk about some of the supply chain issues that you mentioned earlier that really came up.
Well, what's nice is that we're only using very high quality components. So the controller we're using is a Canadian company out of Ontario. And they were wonderful at supplying us. Like they put us at the top of their list, and they were making parts for us by hand to build the bikes we have now. The motor we're using is from the US. The throttles are all European. So like because we're only using high-end components, we didn't have a lot of problems, really. It wasn't too bad. All the metal we're using is Canadian, all the aluminum's Canadian, and we can get all that. So it really hasn't been too bad for us. Yeah.
What kind of a warranty comes with the bikes?
2-year general, and like I say, it's a triple lifetime warranty on the frame and motor. So that's kind of like we really want to push the idea that you can have this vehicle for your whole life, and even give it to your kids and your grandkids, and they can still use it, right? We really like this aspect of Canada making high quality products, and we're really trying to push that idea as far as we can. So yeah, 2 years general, but then everything else is a triple lifetime warranty.
So are you looking into creating maybe, as winter's just around the corner now as well, electric sleds, or maybe some electric quads too?
Possibly, but this bike handles so well in the snow that we're just going to use the bike, I think. Like there's room on the back to put an ATV front tire, and then we can put a ski on the front. Right, we're going to experiment with that this winter. But as long as you know about the axles, it rides like a snowmobile. Like they just goes through the snow, and it's a great time. It's really fun.
Is there enough torque and power to maybe haul a small trailer behind you as well?
I think we have the same amount of torque as an F-150. I think we have 140 Newton meters of torque at the rear wheel. So yes, I think we, yeah.
Well, that's incredible. That's unbelievable.
Okay.
Nathan, with your experience in fabrication, what is your take on the state of manufacturing here in Canada?
That's a tough question. I think there's always a tremendous upswell of new companies trying things. There's always a tremendous amount of R&D happening in Canada. The SR&ED tax refund system we have here that gives you money back on R&D is a very attractive system that a lot of companies take advantage of. But what we don't see is a lot of commercialization and really support for growth for the next step in Canada. right? So we're trying to do this by ourselves. We're trying to do it a performance vehicle, low volume, because we can do that with the capital we have. But if we wanted to go high volume, we wanted to make 10,000 of these bikes now, there just isn't the capital available to support that kind of growth, right? So that, I think, in Canada is something we could do better at, is really supporting companies when they prove themselves and the product's proven in the market and they're ready to go. For a bit more support for those kind of companies, like I think we'll probably need that at some point. We can do Indiegogo, that kind of thing, but it would be nice if the system was set up a bit better to support medium growth companies, kind of thing. Because then I think we'd see more. Then you move into high growth, and then you're a real company, and then you're established, and now you have an industry with a lot of jobs created, right? So it is important to do this.
So in your opinion, how important is the energy sector, oil and gas, to fabrication shops such as yours?
Oh, it's immensely important. I mean, it's the oil and gas sector out here is what supports this whole economy, and we're really just trying to complement this. Like, we don't see it going anywhere. We see it growing. Like, we see in the next few years, it's probably going to start picking up again and all this kind of stuff. So, but Alberta's switching to more clean energy. So electric vehicles, the bad rap about where we're burning coal to charge them, so they're not actually clean. That's changing a bit now. So we're getting a bit greener on our energy production side of things too. But yeah, all the steel that we use obviously is, right. All the aluminum that we use, the welding, I mean, it's all powered by oil and gas. So it's a big part of the culture out here, and it's.
So outside of a welder, what other trades would you be looking for to help you build some of these bikes?
Oh, well, we use a woven hemp product for making the composite panels for the bike. So that's actually something we've been pushing for probably 10 years now. Is that if we had the capacity to produce woven industrial hemp in Western Canada, the price point comes down to almost like cardboard. You can make anything from it. You can make hot tubs, canoes. We're making parts for the bikes. We can make our shipping containers from it. But right now we're buying the product from Germany, and it's tremendously expensive. But we're really pushing the idea of industrial hemp as being a product we can use for these type of vehicles. And we've been testing it now for 2 years on these bikes, and it works great, no problem. So composites is a big part, welding, metal fabrication, CNC machining. We do a lot of metal 3D printing, which is a fairly new technology, but coming to the point now where it's mature enough to actually make production parts with this. So the foot pegs and our electronic rear brake lever and some other parts on the bike, we metal 3D print from stainless steel, and that's done locally as well. So I think it's a fairly simple vehicle to manufacture, and that's really was part of our goal going into it too. Like, if we're going to make a vehicle in Western Canada, we have to be able to make it with what we have around us. There's nothing on it from Princess Auto, but there very well could be a part on it from Princess Auto. There's definitely parts from Canadian Tire on it, kind of thing. But we wanted to make it what we have available for us here and not have to reinvent the wheel as far as manufacturing in Western Canada.
It's funny how you talk about hemp. We had Farming Smarter and Ken Coles on our show a number of times, and he talks about how hemp is used now in BMW auto parts. It's used in driveways, concrete driveways as well, because like you said, it's so strong and so resistant. Now, in your opinion, what are some of the advantages to young Albertans getting into the trades right now?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a job for life. Right, this is what people, when you develop a skill, you have a job for life. And if you develop multiple skills, I got guys working with us here that have tickets in 4 or 5 different trades. They can do whatever they want their whole lives, and they make really good money. So people don't really, the trades in general. You got the house building kind of trades, but what we're doing is more like race vehicle sort of building. And if you get into those kind of trades, the pay is really good. The work is really fulfilling. Everybody that works here loves their jobs. They love seeing things get finished. They love seeing things, come to life, kind of thing. And they make good money, right? So it's a great career path for somebody to get into. And especially with all this new technology, like we've got a 3D printing farm here. And I got a guy, he just does 3D printing. He runs the 3D printers and he loves it. So there's new stuff coming up you can get into for a career that didn't exist 5 years ago. That's really exciting. And I really encourage young people to get into the trades and get into learning, not just the basic trades, but the high skill level trades, and in the new technology too.
And what's that expression too? If you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Nathan Armstrong with Armstrong Custom Fabrication, thanks so much for joining us today from Rocky View County.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Alberta's United Conservative Party leadership race is becoming somewhat of a crowded field these days. We're going to be interviewing as many of the candidates as we can to give you an idea of where they're coming from. Today, we are joined by Danielle Smith. She is the former leader of the Wild Rose Party and now a candidate in the UCP leadership. We're so happy to have her on. Welcome to Bridge City News today, Danielle. Great to have you here.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. So Danielle, you're getting some praise at the same time, heaps of criticism over your promise to implement the Alberta Sovereignty Act. If you end up becoming premier, can you explain what this Sovereignty Act would actually do?
It's a pretty simple piece of legislation. It would just basically be reasserting our Charter of Rights and Freedoms and reasserting that the Constitution matters and that our provincial jurisdiction under Section 92 has to be respected. Unfortunately, we've got a federal government that is lawless. They have acted like the Charter doesn't exist, and they acted like the Constitution doesn't exist. And it's created a lot of uncertainty. We've had multiple projects that have been canceled because they can't see the way through to the finish line because they don't know how to get through the regulatory process, which has been made even more cumbersome by the federal government. This would just be asserting that we've got the right to develop our natural resources. It's been established in the Constitution. And we also have the right to protect our citizens from government overreach. And so it would be on a case-by-case basis that we would invoke it. But by declaring that we would pass the Alberta Sovereignty Act, we're just drawing a line in the sand. We're telling Ottawa to stay in its lane, and if they don't, we're going to push them out.
Okay, so Danielle, but critics are arguing that this is unconstitutional and that you can't really enforce it, considering that the federal government has its own tools to fight back, including withholding transfer funds from Alberta.
I guess what I would like is for Ottawa to treat us with the same respect as Quebec. And I'll give a few examples of the way in which provinces have asserted their constitutional rights. So, for instance, when the Emergencies Act was passed, and we now are beginning to see with the hearings that there was no justification for it, Quebec held an emergency session of their assembly and said, we're not going to enforce that here. We should have done the same. When they started seizing bank accounts, we should have encouraged people to move their money over to credit unions and said, sorry, that's against our constitutional rights. We are not enforcing that. I suspect that in the fall, we're going to see new mandates come in from the federal level. And I've heard loud and clear, especially from moms who are concerned about their kids. They do not want their kids forced back into any kind of restrictions. And if they put pressure on us, we'll just say, no, we're not going to enforce that. British Columbia has just recently said they're not going to enforce the laws on hard drugs. They, for years, didn't enforce the legislation around our criminal code legislation around possession and use of drugs, and now they've extended it to heroin and crystal meth and fentanyl with the government's blessing. So it seems to me we've got lots of precedent for different provinces to say, you know what, we have a different culture here. We want to enforce our laws in a different way here, and we're just asking for Alberta to be treated the same, and we're going to assert that we will be.
Okay, well, the UCP obviously seems to be deeply divided. So how do you propose to bring the party together?
There's I think a couple of issues that have caused us to lose support. One of them was the fact that we took a 180-degree turn from what we said we were going to do on vaccine mandates and vaccine passports. We'd gone so far as to change the public health legislation, saying we would never force anyone to get vaccinated. And then they ended up changing their mind in September. I think that caused a permanent lack of trust. And that would be one thing I would say is there's another way when we get into respiratory virus season to better protect our seniors. We won't be locking down again. We won't be firing people from their jobs because they've made a certain medical choice. In fact, I'd go so far as to amend the Human Rights Act to make sure that people cannot be discriminated against on the basis of medical choice or their political opinions. I think that will win back one portion. The other part of the problem has been all of these autonomy groups that have started up, whether it's the Buffalo Project or whether it's the Alberta Prosperity Project or the Wild Rose Independence Party, they're frustrated that we haven't acted on the mandate that we were given to end equalization. And from what I have seen over the past 20 years, we keep on arguing that we need to assert ourselves more like Quebec, collect our own income tax, collect our own pension, collect our own employment insurance, have our own police service. And we've got to start acting on those things, and we'll win that part of the party back as well. So this is why I've taken such a strong position that people want to see us act. They don't want to see us write stern letters. They don't want to see us continue to fight things through the courts that have been stacked by Ottawa appointees and seem to always go against us. They want to see us respect the Constitution, assert our rights, and demand to have the same respect. as Quebec does in our federation. That's what we need to do to be able to win those votes back.
Okay, Danielle, many people believe that Jason Kenney lost the confidence of the party over the way that he handled the COVID pandemic. So you're saying that under your leadership, there would be no provincial lockdowns, and you're saying no to mandatory vaccinations. But Kenney made similar promises and then gave in to the pressure, I guess, to change. So why should voters believe that with you it will be different?
I've been watching this unfold over the last 2 years. And I've been looking at the politicians who did have the courage to stand up in the face of pressure, like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem. You can look at, I don't understand why there's been such suppression of the full range of discussion around what our medical options are, but we now know after 2 years that we do have options. Focus protection should always have been the approach. I think what we will see once we start looking at the jurisdictions around the world that did the best, and Alberta did pretty well, it was because we did a better job than other jurisdictions of making sure our folks in long-term care were protected. And so that's the approach that we take, not preventing kids from going to school or preventing people from going to restaurants or forcing them and coercing them to take vaccines. We've got to protect those who are most vulnerable. So make sure that we do that in our nursing homes, make sure that we've got effective therapeutics so that when somebody does get diagnosed with COVID, they can have a treatment to prevent them from deteriorating and going into hospital. That should have been the approach over the last year and a half, and that will be the approach when we get into the fall respiratory virus season.
Okay, so you obviously have very different ideas on how to handle the future pandemic issues should they arise, and how to deal with healthcare issues. Will MLAs be able to voice their opinions freely, or will they have to toe the line?
I believe in the individual autonomy of MLAs. I think part of what happens with caucus solidarity is when you have members pass policy on certain issues, you kind of expect that if you're going to run for the party, that you're going to endorse what the members say. There was no policy on emerging issues, especially around COVID. And instead, we didn't actually listen to our MLAs. If we had, we probably would have taken slightly different approaches in Calgary and Edmonton versus our rural areas. We saw in other jurisdictions like BC and Ontario that they did have a more nuanced approach with fewer restrictions in outlying areas. And if we had done that, I think we would have been able to have a better balance. So I would say that the only way you get that feedback is if MLAs are able to go out into their community, do town halls, bring that feedback back to caucus, and make sure that those senior leadership is listening to it. When I was a leader the last time, we always relied on our MLAs to tell us what was going on in the community. And it wasn't just a wild rose concept. That's how Ralph Klein and Peter Lougheed operated as well. They made sure that if they were going to pass something, that they had buy-in on the caucus. Because if you can't convince your caucus, you're not going to be able to convince the general public either. So I think that's been a missing piece, but we would certainly bring that back.
Okay, Albertans are frustrated with the federal government's position on oil and gas. So what would you do to create a better playing field for the energy sector?
I'm going to look at this from a constitutional perspective. If you look at our constitution, we have the exclusive right to develop our resources. And Ottawa has been interfering in our jurisdiction every step of the way. We recently got a judgment from the Court of Appeal saying that their Bill C-69, which is, we've been calling it the No More Pipelines Act, but it's kind of the No More Build Anything Anywhere Act. They've said that that goes way too far. So we would push them back on that, continue with the court litigation. But more importantly, we've got to start acting independently. And I want people to be in the mindset of the fact that we do have the sovereign right to make these decisions over our resources. And what would we do if we didn't have Ottawa standing in our way? I would say that what we would do is we would start developing economic corridors with our partners. The one that is the furthest along in development is from Fort McMurray to Churchill. Partner with our First Nations, partner with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. We own most of that land anyway because it was transferred to us as Crown land. Develop a 10-kilometer wide right-of-way, build rail infrastructure, build water and electricity infrastructure, bring heating and broadband to those communities, and then also build oil and gas pipelines. And that would be the way that we would get to one port. We can also do something similar, working with our First Nations to get to Thunder Bay, to Tuktoyaktuk in the north, to Port of Prince Rupert. And that to me is the way that Alberta can assert itself as the leader on economic development in Western Canada. And I'm not going to wait until Ottawa approves that. I'm going to work with our partners and make sure that we start working on those corridors. We've been talking about it since the 1930s. It's time to start acting on it.
Okay, Danielle, what about healthcare? Should we keep throwing money at it, or while wait times and physicians availability, they don't seem to be improving? So are you open to making some kind of private healthcare part of the equation, or what's your take on that?
The main thing we need to do, and I think people want to make changes to healthcare that fall under the umbrella of the Canada Health Act, and I'm perfectly happy to do that. The issue that we have in healthcare is we've got way too many administrators and bureaucrats who are preventing dollars from flowing down to the front line. So I want to return to having individual hospital boards with funding following the patient to those facilities to create a motivation for our hospitals to figure out ways that they can deliver more services and get rewarded for it. I also want to see health spending accounts. It's a kind of concept that many businesses use, where they give their workers a little bit of money so that they can pay for all the things that aren't covered by healthcare. A lot of people that I've spoken with who want vaccine choice, they also use alternative medicine to keep themselves well. They use massage therapists and physiotherapy and chiropractic. They want to go to counselors and therapists and dietitians. None of that is covered right now. So let's help people with a little bit of money so that they can take care of their conditions at the front end, so that we don't end up with so many people in hospital because of chronic conditions that have been allowed to get acute. We need a major transformation in who makes the decisions and who gets the money, and we've got to start squeezing out those management layers. So I'm prepared to do that transformation. We've got to get started on that too.
And then, of course, along that same vein, there's been a very tense relationship between the provincial government and doctors. So what would you do to change this situation?
We've got to realize our fight is not with the frontline operators. It's not the doctors that we should be fighting with, not the paramedics, not the nurses. They're just as frustrated, I think, with the level of bureaucratic interference and them being able to do their job. They're just as frustrated with the mismanagement. They're just as frustrated in not having the resources on the front line. So I think that we can have very positive relationship with our front line, get more dollars to them so that we can hire more doctors, we can attract more nurses back into the profession. We can make sure that our paramedics aren't sitting for an entire shift at hospital waiting rooms because they can't offload patients. These are all management issues. And so if we work together on solving those management issues, I am confident that we will repair a relationship with the front line and get better service for patients.
Okay, and then as far as law enforcement goes, do you believe, Danielle, that it's a good idea for Alberta to have its own police force? Is it worth the extra financial cost?
Yes, and I would start it immediately for a couple of reasons. We've had a lot of our frontline officers who've been fired from their jobs or put on leave because they refused to enforce some of the draconian decisions that have come down. I talked to an RCMP officer who was supposed to be on the crew that went and arrested Pastor Coates, and he refused to do that. That's the kind of person that I want in law enforcement, somebody who will value religious rights, someone who will value our charter rights. He also chose not to be vaccinated, and that is his right as a person who has bodily autonomy. So those are the kind of people that I want to see have jobs in law enforcement so that we can change the culture of law enforcement. One of the things that I hear frustration with in rural Alberta is the length of time it takes for our current officers to get out to calls when there's property damage or vandalism or theft. That would be a way in which our Alberta Provincial Police could augment the law enforcement. And then I also hear frustration in our big cities. We've got so many of our calls that are being responded to are mental health calls, are addiction calls, and we need a force that can better connect people who are in that kind of distress with the health system and the services that they need to be able to get clean from drugs so that they can get back into having a normal, independent life. And I think that if we train our Alberta Provincial Police officers in a high level of soft skills and negotiation and the ability to respond to those mental health calls, they'll be able to act as an additional service to where we're having problems in our big city centers. So I don't think there's any reason to delay. And I think that they'll do such a good job that we'll be able to expand that service out. But we've got to also get started by beginning that force so that we can take control over our own policing. And we know that we've got a police agency that responds to the priorities of Alberta.
So many more questions I'd like to get to, which we're running out of time, but I do want to fit one more in. Danielle, you have admitted that you made a mistake back when you were leading the Wild Rose Party and crossed the floor to the Progressive Conservatives. So what vibes are you getting from the current UCP members? Are they willing to forgive and forget and move on, or what are you getting?
Well, there's no question it was a mistake in 2015, and I ended up losing my nomination, and Jim Prentice ended up losing the election. I think people now can begin to see that part of what we were trying to do is to bring unity to the conservative movement. I mean, we did it the wrong way, and the public wasn't ready for it at that time. But now I'm hearing is fear that the unity that we brought, that Jason Kenney and Brian Jean brought by bringing the party together, is going to bust apart. I don't want to see that happen. I know Brian Jean doesn't want to see that happen. It's why both of us have jumped into this race, is that we want to keep this movement together. Both of us gave up an awful lot for unity, and I believe that the UCP project is one that's worth saving. I think that we can be unified as a conservative movement, and if we do bust apart, we're going to end up with another 4 years or 8 years of NDP government, and I don't want to see that. When the NDP came in, investment in the province stopped. We had a ton of job loss. We saw an escalation in spending, an escalation in debt, and we're just now back into surplus. I want to make sure that we can maintain some conservative values in how we manage those resources on behalf of taxpayers, and also do a better job of delivering those frontline care programs. So that's the reason why I'm in the race, is to be a force of unity, and I'm glad to be getting some of the positive feedback that I am, because I think it's time to make a change so we can put Alberta first.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Danielle. Good luck in your campaign.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Danielle Smith is the candidate for the UCP leadership race. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.